The New Testament in all Christian Bibles comes from a long history of original ancient manuscripts. Christ's message has been translated, written, retranslated, and rewritten many times over before it's made its way into the modern English Bibles we have today. The first representations we have of a structured Bible are the earliest and oldest Greek codices. As part of a larger series of presentations based on the lineage of the New Testament in English chart, this overview will cover the earliest Greek codices and their influence and impact on the establishment of the New Testament scriptures over time. A codex is a collection of written text physically structured as a stack of individual leaves or a stack of folded leaves that are bound on one side. The binding ensures the collection of included manuscripts remain consistent and maintains the correct manuscript leaf order. The leaves of the ancient manuscript codices were made from either papyrus, a thick paper-like plant-based page, or parchment, a prepared animal skin. Vellum is a specific form of parchment made from calf skin instead of the regular goat or sheepskin. A codex is distinguished from a scroll, where multiple leaves were bound to each other side by side, making a long, continuous writing surface, which was then rolled up from either or both ends. The common modern book structure we are familiar with today is based on the codex format. The early Greek codices show how the Bible was being formed at its earliest stage. Not just how it would be physically structured, but more importantly, what it would contain. The early church leaders sought to collect and organize the text that were available. The effort was not merely for historical documentation's sake, but rather to establish a more consistent and encompassing message of the teachings of Christ. An ever-growing number of manuscripts existed at the time, covering the many teachings and works of Jesus. Some of those texts came from highly involved and influential people in the early Christian world. Some were recountings of activities and events related to the early followers, and others were letters or other correspondence between various Christian communities. Not all of the available text at the time was deemed worthy of being included in the original codices. Some texts were seen as inauthentic or misguided, or did not truly represent the life of Jesus, or were not consistent with his teachings. The text of some of those rejected manuscripts still exists today. However, it is clear that the general list of included content, now considered canon, was established relatively early in the Christian timeline. The early Greek codices play a major role in the modern-day Bibles. They have been used as the basis for and have heavily influenced the various collections and compilations of Greek texts, including the different versions by John Mill, Johann Bengel, and Constantine von Tischendorf. They are also part of the collective Greek works Westcott Hort and Nestle Aland. Prominent Bibles, such as the English Revised Version, the American Standard Version, the Revised Standard Version, and the New American Standard, among others, contain text translated directly or indirectly from one or more of the early Greek codices. The four earliest and most influential codices are Codex Vaticanus, Codex Alexandrinus, Codex Sinaiticus, and Codex Ephraemi Rescriptus. Each of these prominent codices has a different history about how they were created, when they were created, who created them, and what makes them unique. Let's take a brief look at each of them individually. Codex Vaticanus. Codex Vaticanus is written on parchment leaves in a 3-column per page face layout. The written text is uncial majuscule script, which was an earlier preferred form of writing comprised entirely of capital letters. Manuscripts created in later centuries were more often written in minuscule script style using lowercase letters. The Codex text contains no word separation nor sentence punctuation. Analysis of the writing suggests at least 2 different scribes, possibly 3, worked on separate sections of the Codex. The Codex has been dated to as early as 325 to 350 CE. However, many biblical historians disagree with the relatively narrow time frame and place it more generally somewhere in the 4th century. The exact origin of Codex Vaticanus is unknown. However, some possible locations have been suggested, including Rome, southern Italy, Alexandria, or Caesarea. Of the 3 primary text criticism text types, Alexandrian, Byzantine, and Western, the text within Codex Vaticanus is considered to be Alexandrian in nature. Alexandrian text tends to be more terse and direct, uses fewer words, lacks literary polish, and can sometimes be more challenging to read and translate when compared to the other text types. The original codex was determined to consist of a total of 820 sheets. However, tragically, 71 of those sheets were lost. The time period when these pages were lost is unknown. For the New Testament, the original sheets that were lost were Hebrews chapter 9, verse 14b through chapter 13, verse 25, the epistles of 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon, and the book of Revelations. Over time, the original ink on the codex began to fade. At some point in the 10th or 11th century, an effort was made to correct the fading text, and the entire codex was overwritten with new ink, covering the original letters. The codex was brought to the Vatican sometime during the 15th century. The first occurrence the codex is listed in the Vatican Library Catalog is in the year 1475. Also during the 15th century, the missing Old and New Testament codex sheets were replaced with text from contemporary 15th century minuscule manuscript text. Whether the replacement text was added before or after being received at the Vatican is unknown. The Codex has been housed in the Vatican Library since the 15th century and acquired its commonly known name due to its current location and ownership. With the exception of the missing original epistles and the Book of Revelation, Codex Vaticanus contains all the New Testament books now considered canon. Some notable content in the Codex Vaticanus include the short ending of the Gospel of Mark and the absence of the Johannine comma, which are the Trinity verses 1 John chapter 5 verses 7 and 8. Codex Vaticanus was used as one of the primary sources by critical text compiler Samuel Tregelles when he created his Greek New Testament in 1857. Tregelles' Greek New Testament was subsequently used as a source for the English Revised Version, which in turn was used for the creation of the American Standard Version. The Codex was also used as one of the primary sources by critical text compilers Brooke, Westcott, and Fenton Hort when they created their Greek version of the New Testament in 1881. This compilation, commonly known as Westcott-Hort, was also used as a source for the English Revised Version and later the American Standard Version. Codex Alexandrinus. Codex Alexandrinus was written on 773 vellum leaves in a 2-column per page face layout. The Codex is divided into 4 volumes, with 3 volumes containing the Old Testament and the 4th volume for the New Testament. Sadly, 31 leaves of the original Codex Alexandrinus New Testament are missing and are most likely permanently lost to time. Missing pages include the Gospel of Matthew through chapter 25, verse 5. The text is an unsealed majuscule script, and the text contains no word separation nor sentence punctuation. Analysis of the writing suggests at least 2 different scribes, possibly as many as 5, worked on separate sections of the Codex. The general consensus among biblical researchers date the initial writing of the Codex to some time within the 400 to 440 CE time frame, with multiple passes of corrections being applied at later dates. Most scholars believe the Codex originated in the city of Alexandria and was later transferred to Constantinople by Athanasius III, Patriarch of Alexandria, when he traveled to escape Christian persecution. This occurred sometime during the years 1308 to 1316. Later, Athanasius traveled to Crete, however, left the Codex behind in Constantinople. Whether this was done intentionally or not is not known. The Codex remained in Constantinople until 1627, when Cyril Lucaris, the Patriarch of Constantinople, gifted the Codex Alexandrinus to Charles I, King of England. The Codex stayed in England and currently resides in the British Library in London. The New Testament text in the Codex has been identified as exhibiting two different text criticism text types. The Gospels exhibit Byzantine text type characteristics, while the rest of the New Testament is of the Alexandrian type text. While the Alexandrian text is more abrupt and unpolished, the Byzantine text type presents a more descriptive, refined, and well-formed Greek text format. Codex Alexandrinus does not include the Johannine, Trinity verses of 1 John chapter 5 verses 7 through 8. However, the long ending of Gospel of Mark is included. The Codex contains all of the books considered common canon of the New Testament. Extra books found in the Codex that are not considered New Testament canon are 1st and 2nd Clement. The Codex was used as one of the primary sources by Samuel Tregelles when he created his Greek New Testament in 1857. Codex Sinaiticus. Codex Sinaiticus was created using vellum parchment with the majority of leaves formatted with a 4-column per page face layout and some sections formatted in a 2-column layout. The lettering is uncial majuscule script, and the text contains no word separation but does include some limited word and sentence punctuation. The true count of the original Codex leaves is unknown because large sections of the Old Testament are missing, although scholars do believe the full Old Testament did exist originally. According to Fenton Hort, co-creator of Westcott-Hort Greek text compilation, it was written in the West, possibly in Rome. However, other scholars believe the Codex originated in the city of Caesarea or somewhere in Egypt. The Codex has been dated to the mid-4th century, which places it in the same general time frame as Codex Vaticanus. Some scholars believe both the Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus were held and maintained together in the port city of Caesarea during the 6th century. In 1844, Constantine von Tischendorf, a biblical scholar, traveled to St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt. He found 43 leaves of a previously unknown manuscript that appeared to be a smaller section of a larger codex. Tischendorf claimed to have found the leaves on a trash and tinder pile used to light cooking fires in the monastery. The incredible story that Tischendorf saved a priceless work of biblical scripture from certain destruction at the hands of incompetent monks spread wide in the Christian communities. However, many scholars soon began to doubt Tischendorf's self-claims of heroism and believed he simply found the manuscript leaves stored somewhere in the monastery. Tischendorf visited the monastery 2 more times, once in 1853, during which no new manuscript leaves were found, and again in 1859, when monks had located an additional 347 leaves, the majority of the remaining codex contents. Tischendorf persuaded the monks to allow him to take the codex to study it. The monks agreed, but considered the release of the codex to be a loan and that it would be returned to them at a later date. However, Tischendorf claimed the monks allowed him to take the codex indefinitely and not necessarily as a loan. In 1869, Tischendorf presented the 347 leaves of the codex to Emperor Alexander II of Russia. In 1933, the Soviet government sold those leaves of the partial codex to the British Museum. Since the time of its discovery, Codex Sinaiticus has not been kept in a single binding. Instead, it was kept apart in 4 separate sets of leaves, each set being housed in a different library or monastery. There are 347 leaves in the British Library in London, 12 leaves in St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt, 43 leaves in the Leipzig University Library in Germany, and 3 leaves in the Russian National Library in St. Petersburg. The extant version of Codex Sinaiticus contains approximately half of the Old Testament and the complete New Testament. Additional books in the Codex include the entire deuterocanonical books, the Epistle of Barnabas, and a part of the Shepherd of Hermas. Codex Sinaiticus contains the short ending of the Gospel of Mark and does not include the Johannine comma Trinity verses 1 John chapter 5 verses 7 and 8. Codex Sinaiticus was used as one of the primary sources by Constantine von Tischendorf when he created his Greek text compilation in 1849. It was also used as a source for the Westcott Hort Greek version of the New Testament published in 1881. Codex Ephraemi Rescriptus. Codex Ephraemi Rescriptus has a more complicated history. The codex was all but destroyed some time in the 12th century when all of the original text was scraped and washed off, so some of the original leaves could be reused to record various treatises and discussions by Ephraim the Syrian. This is where the codex got its currently used official name. The Ephraim treatises manuscript changed ownership multiple times from the 12th through the 17th centuries and was rebound in 1602. Sometime in the early 1700s, French Protestant pastor Pierre Alix noticed the faint remnants of writings under the Ephraim treatises text, and an effort began to recover the lost original text. Tischendorf suggested the original codex was created in Egypt, although the true origin is unknown. The codex was written on parchment in a single column format. The lettering is unsealed majuscule script and has been dated to the 425 to 450 CE time period, although many scholars estimate to be more generally in the early 5th century. The text shows characteristics of the Alexandrian text type, but with a fair amount of influence of Byzantine type text. Analysis of the text suggests that 2 or 3 scribes worked on different sections. Codex Ephraemi currently contains only 6 books of the Old Testament. The remaining were most likely lost during its destruction for use with the Ephraim treatises manuscript. The Codex does include portions of every New Testament book except for 2 Thessalonians and 2 John. Whether these 2 New Testament books were intentionally excluded from the original or were lost during the manuscript repurposing is not known. Codex Ephraemi includes the long ending of the Gospel of Mark, but does not include the Johannine comma Trinity verses. Codex Ephraemi Rescriptus was used as one of the primary sources by Constantine von Tischendorf when he created his Greek text compilation in 1849, and also by Samuel Tregelles when he created his version of the Greek New Testament in 1857. The 4 codices covered here represent the earliest known complete or nearly complete Bibles. They have laid the foundation for the majority of modern Bibles and have been the backbone for biblical research and discovery.